All right, so today we're going to do kind of a review of some concepts that we talked about last week, or last unit. It's really important to understand the difference between physical and chemical properties, and it's really important to also understand the difference between a physical and a chemical change. So we're going to go over that right now. Okay, a property. In science, when we use the word property, we don't mean something that you own. It's really a trait or a characteristic that characterizes that material or object. So that means it kind of tells us more information about a particular object. Okay, so for example, it's a trait that characterizes a material or object. Okay, now for example, okay, we have physical properties. And we also then have chemical properties. Okay? And a physical property, you can determine it without a chemical reaction. Okay? So for example, okay, color might be an example. The ability for it to be shaped. So, for example, this piece of paper can be crumpled. That's a physical property. I can see that without the addition of any other chemicals. I can see it without a chemical change occurring. The ability for it to be ripped, folded. I can change, the shape of it, that kind of a thing. Okay, we're going to call that malleability. And that's the ability to change shape. Okay, but there's lots of different physical properties that you guys are going to kind of explore in Lab 14. Okay. Then we also have chemical properties. Now, chemical properties can only be determined by adding another chemical to see if there's a reaction. Okay, now you might remember in, was it Lab 6 that we did in our last unit? Lab 6 demonstrated some chemical properties. When you added certain chemicals, it would bubble or fizz, it would change temperature. Those are some really good indications that a chemical reaction is happening. Okay, so a chemical reaction a chemical reaction, for example, is when one or more substance, they kind of change chemically into another substance. Okay, so for example, you've seen like how metal sometimes will rust. Well, that is the oxygen in water or air typically that is causing the metal to oxidize. And what that means is it's actually, I believe the oxygen is interacting with the metal and it's causing it to chemically change and it becomes rusted. And so rust is actually a different chemical composition than the rest of the metal. So rust is going to be a really good example. Also, if I were to light this paper on fire, for example, it would go through what we call combustion. And when something goes through combustion, it takes oxygen from the air and it uses that as fuel for a fire. And the fire will then change the chemical composition of this paper, and it will be a totally different compound. Okay? That is really important. But one thing that you guys need to know, especially for the lab, okay? I'm going to give you some examples of different properties that you're actually going to be looking at here, and then you'll need to know these for your lab. Okay, so we already talked about color. And I think you all know what color is. Okay, hardness. Okay, the hardness of a substance is its ability to resist scratching. Okay, so if something is not very hard, it's more soft if you can like kind of scratch into it. Okay, we really, you know, like if you take like, for example, a penny, it's really hard to kind of scratch like your nail using it, like your nail into it and make a mark. But there are other things that you can do, you know, other materials that if you scratch with your nail, I mean, you can see that you make a mark. So that would be a softer substance as opposed to a harder substance. Okay? Luster. Okay? Luster is if the substance reflects light. So is it shiny? Is it dull? Is it metallic looking? Okay, glassy, maybe it's waxy. Those are all different words that you can use to describe the luster, and that's just how it looks. Remember, I'm listing these under the physical properties or physical characteristics because they're all things that you can see or you can find out without involving other chemicals and changing the chemical composition. Okay, light transmission. Okay, when light transmission, it's just, can light pass through an object? So like this paper, I mean, it has okay light transmission, right? If you hold it up, like you could still see, like if this was the only thing covering your eye, you could still see light coming through. You can't see as much light as, like for example, the glass. And my glasses have excellent light transmission because they're transparent. And so the light transmission in my glasses would be at a much higher quality than the light transmission of this piece of paper because it's not letting through as much light. Okay, then we have texture, and that's really how does it feel in your fingers? Is it gritty? Is it smooth? Those types of things. So that's texture. Okay, and the last one that you guys are going to test is going to be flexibility. Does your material kind of bend with a little pressure? For example, like this pen cap has some flexibility, not nearly as much as this paper though. Okay? Okay. We're also going to be dealing with a chemical property. Okay? The chemical property that you're going to be looking at today is your substance's reaction with hydrochloric acid. And you're just looking at, does it react? So the question then is there a chemical reaction or not? Okay? And remember the ways that you can tell. There might be bubbling, fizzing, there might be heat, there might be light produced, there might be a gas or a smell produced. Those are some indications that a reaction is happening and that it's a chemical reaction. Okay? Go ahead and make sure that you take down these notes. Knowing the difference between a physical and a chemical property are going to be very, very important for you for the future. So please make a note of that. And then also, please make sure to watch the video about the introduction to the lab so that you know exactly what you're doing. All right, great.